So, speaking of inspiration, who has inspired you musically?
Haha, good questions. I have a lot of inspiration from the 70s. That's where I grew up. That's where I figure a lot of my musical inspiration came from. And the reason why is because I really think back in those late 70s, 1977 in particular, there were so many great bands out there making great music. The musicians really were making, they weren't making just songs, they were making albums of songs that flowed together, went together. And so the people that I was always inspired were people that made albums that I could listen to from track 1 to track 11. It wasn't just one song. Obviously they had hit singles, and a lot of the people I was inspired by had big individual songs, but for me it was more about the bands and the albums and the experience of listening to an album. So those bands that I grew up on, bands like Cheap Trick, the Beatles, who had just album after album after album, um, bands like Queen, who had a spectrum of music on each album. It wasn't just one type of song repeated 11 times. It was a whole different palette of songs and a whole bunch of different colors on one album. So those are the type of bands that I was inspired by. And like I said, if you Google the year 1977 and you find out all those albums that came out from that year, you'll find out some of my biggest influences.
At what age did you start playing guitar, and do you play any other instruments?
I started playing the trumpet actually before I started playing guitar. I picked up the guitar when I was 5 because there was one line around the house. I was 5 years old, but I don't think I really took it seriously until I was about 11, and that's when I really sat down and said, "Hey, I want to do this 24/7." I sat and looked at myself in the mirror, played air guitar when I wasn't playing the real guitar, and really took it seriously like around age 11. Before that, though, I had played the trumpet in the marching band, and I also played drums. And I had my own drum set, and also played in the school marching band snare drum. But when I had my own drum kit and I started playing drums, I was like, wait a second, you mean I'm gonna have to sit in the back? I'm gonna have to come early to set up all my equipment, and I'm gonna actually have to have a van or something to tote around all this equipment? Screw that! I'm gonna play guitar, stand in front. So I always say playing guitar is the best job in the world because you know a frontman, vocalist, lead singer, you just you're asking for trouble. You're asking to fight with yourself. You're asking to battle with yourself because the instrument that you have resides inside you. Your throat is basically your instrument. But with a guitar, at least you can. It's something that is tangible. You can put it down. You can, you don't have to go on a completely different diet to play guitar, but sometimes with singing you do. And I know that because I sing in front Roxie 77 as well.
Uh, um, of all the guitars you have, which one would be your favorite?
I would call it my first girlfriend. It's a 1972 Gibson Les Paul Gold Top. It's got so many scratches and dings and cuts on her, but she still plays amazing every single night. I use her on all of the records that I've played on so far, and I've played, over 30 records now at this point. It's appeared on, so it's been on a lot of different records. It's been with me since the 80s and all the bands that I was in back then. A lot of them, which you may never ever hear of, or but they were bands that helped me get to where I am today. And it's all been one big journey, and it's great to say that I went through on that journey with that one consistent guitar.
So, out of all of the records you've played on, which one would be your favorite?
That's impossible to answer because at one point you do have to there's such special moments of each album that you play on, and sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's just complete joy, sometimes it's actual depression that you hear when you listen back. But the end of the day, I'm proud of pretty much everything I've ever been able to record and lay down and release to the public. I wouldn't release it if I wasn't, you know. There are some highlights that I obviously think are special to me in the fact that, you know, there was the band Electric Angels. It was my first album that I ever made. It was on Atlantic Records. We had an iconic producer named Tony Visconti who worked with T-Rex, Mark Bolan, David Bowie, Paul McCartney. He'd done so many great records, and he worked on ours as our debut album. That's very special. Another special album was the Slash's Snake Pit record, where, you know, it's called Ain't Life Grand and has a lot of really good musicianship on it. All the guys in the band that played on that album were really killer musicians. Plus the two albums that I was able to have a good hand in writing with Alice Cooper were The Eyes of Alice Cooper and Dirty Diamonds. You know, luckily with my time with Alice Cooper, I've been able to play when I'm when I've been in the band, I've been able to play on each of the releases that he's had since 1996. But those two albums, Eyes of Alice Cooper and Dirty Diamonds, were extra special because the band all got to write together and really contribute to making this, I don't know, garage, stripped down, bare bones sort of rock and roll gritty albums that I think both myself and Alice are proud of today.
So, playing with your own band and Slash's Snake Pit, how does that differ from playing with Alice Cooper?
Um, well, I can speak from my own band. Um, Obviously, when the way we tour with Alice Cooper is a completely different level than the way we tour with Roxy 77, and it's you know it's just about economics. We all have a great time. It doesn't matter. There's different situations where we have uh, the, we have the same enjoyment out of playing the shows. You know, it's for obviously less people, but still, hey man, if you can get 50 passionate people seeing your own band, it's the same vibe as getting, you know, 5,000 people to see you at a theater, or and because you really feel that energy. But at the same time, it is nicer, I will tell you this, to go back to my own room or in my own bunk and on my tour bus than maybe share a stolen cab or you know, or get a ride from a bunch of buddies back to a hotel, you know, Motel 6 with the whole band staying in the same room. So like I said, it is a different level of touring, but at the same time, there's still a genuine love for doing what we get to do.
What's next for Roxy 77 in Casablanca?
Well, as we haven't mentioned Casablanca because we are putting out an album or and recorded the album. It's coming out right now in the next few months. It's our second album called Riding a Black Swan. I'm really happy with the way the guitars turned out on that record, and I hope everybody goes out and supports it and checks it out. I think it's going to be available on iTunes. The single is out now, and you can check out the rest of the album. I guess in the next month, by the time you listen to this, the next month, or definitely before the holiday season. And as far as Roxy 77 is concerned, we have recorded an EP. We are mixing it, putting the final touches on it, and hopefully all that process will end up and be ready for a early 2014 release. So look for that early next year.
Awesome. So, do you guys plan on touring the US at any time soon?
You know what? Like I said, we've made a lot of friends in a lot of different places, especially, you know, touring with Alice Cooper. There's so many cool fans that have offered to say, "Hey, man, I could book this area and this area." It's just a matter of putting um, all those little cool areas together. I think that Alice has a really cool stronghold around that northeast part, that Ohio, uh, Pennsylvania area where, like where you're from, where we could really do something and make a Roxy 77 run very successful. So hopefully we'll be able to do that in 2014 as well.
If it's going all to hell, we might as well enjoy the